the truth, and I don't like it any more than you do. Until we have a vaccine or an effective treatment or enough widespread immunity that new cases fail to materialize, the option of returning to normalcy doesn't exist.
And that means figuring out how to live with COVID-19, he says, until it no longer exists. Cheryl Corley, NPR News, Chicago.
Okay, so I'm on my way over to where Bing Liu was killed. He was a research assistant professor at the University of Pittsburgh. The details surrounding his murder that occurred a couple days ago are still pretty sketchy. The best newspaper in the Pittsburgh area is the Pittsburgh Gazette. And the reporter from the Pittsburgh Gazette has outlined the basic story and the holes in it, or let's say the gaps in the story that still need to be filled in. I'm not trying to fuel any conspiracy theories here. I just want to make sure that this that this story doesn't fall off the radar, or that we don't just sneeze it off, or it doesn't disappear in the news cycle. And since I'm from Pittsburgh and I live on the north side of the rivers, and I practically live in Ross Township, I thought I'd drive over there. So the details that are sketchy about it, I'll cover right now on the ride again. I think I did some of it on the way here. Wow, that guy almost ran into me. But everybody in his lab, very well respected, hardworking, really nice guy. So this hit everybody from his lab out of the blue. Just a caveat here, I am not friends with him. I don't know anybody in his lab. I'm in the Department of Neuroscience, the Department of Neurobiology at the School of Medicine. And so this is my own opinion. This is me on my own time. I'm not speaking on behalf of the University of Pittsburgh or the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine in any way, shape, or form. But it's just to clear up any possible misconceptions because of the fact that we do work for the same faculty, or we did work for the same faculty, and that I hold the same faculty rank as him. I'm sure I'm not as productive a scientist as he is. And that's part of the thing to keep in mind here. From a scientist's perspective, he was very successful, and he was married with no children. He had been in Pittsburgh for a while, first did a postdoc at the Carnegie Mellon University with a guy who had won the Turing Award in 2007. So a real impressive math guy, And after that postdoc, he moved to the lab that he was currently in at the University of Pittsburgh. So you're dealing with a dude who, at least on paper, is a very prolific publisher, a very smart guy, and all of his lab mates are devastated by this, right? And so one of the things that I notice in the Pittsburgh Gazette article and in many other articles is that they keep saying that he was about to make a breakthrough in COVID-19 biology or whatever, and they don't go any further other than to say that the lab that he worked for is a lab that works on the computational modeling of the physical interaction between things like a receptor and a spike protein, and then try to work out ways to interfere with those interactions therapeutically. So you can imagine a number of speculative scenarios on things that he was working on, but you can also imagine things that he might have been working on that would make people want to off him. And so if we're just talking about speculative theories and crazy motivations, I'll just give you one example that immediately pops to mind. Imagine if he's working on the interaction between the ACE2 receptor, the spike protein, and for example, and hydrochloroquine. And if he was about to draw some structural, affinity model that says that there is a significant effect or a significant interaction between the structure of hydrochloroquine and the structure of the ACE2 receptor, or the structure of the spike proteins of SARS-CoV-2, then that would be a very interesting reason to mess with him, because simply there's a lot of money to be lost with this unpatentable cheap drug, as opposed to any of the number of treatments that are out there now that, if you believe the story you just heard on NPR, we're not going to be able to get out and be normal anymore unless we have a vaccine or some effective treatment. And so if you believe that narrative, then there's an awful lot of money to be lost if that effective treatment ends up to be hydrochloroquine, and we don't need to spend any money on any of the things like remdesivir or any of the vaccines that they claim are necessary. And there are other therapies as well, like, right? I mean, there are therapies like high doses of vitamin C, this kind of thing. He could have been working on anything which potentially could result in the loss of millions, if not billions of dollars in pharmaceutical profits. And that's the kind of thing you have to keep in mind here. If you want to talk about conspiracy theories, we always should be talking about where the money goes. And at this stage, if he was killed for his research probably had to do with people potentially losing lots and lots of money. So, speculation aside, the reporter from the Pittsburgh Gazette also points out that they interviewed the wife to confirm that he was indeed the guy who was shot, but they don't confirm with the wife that he and this Han Gu were actually friends, or acquaintances, or knew each other, or anything like that. And that I find a little bit odd. The reporter at the Pittsburgh Gazette does not point it out as odd. I'm saying it's odd. He's very objective in the article. That could just be that the police officers, the Ross Township police, were not ready to make comments. And I think that's something that I want to tamp down the conspiracy theory when it comes to this, because Ross Township and the law enforcement officers that are working for Ross Township are normal, everyday guys. They're not superheroes. They're not working in a big town. Ross Township is what you're seeing me drive through right now, which is essentially a wooded, hilly, uncrowded place where most people have a pretty decent house and a pretty decent lawn, and are kind of living the American dream. So there's not a lot of high crime out here. There's not a lot of reason for these police officers to be extremely skilled. There's a deer in the middle of the road and a dead raccoon. There's not a lot of reason for these police officers to be extremely adept at deflecting questions in a public press conference or any other sort of cover-up. It's not very likely. So I certainly don't think that, and that's part of the reason why I'm driving out here, just to try and get an idea of what kind of neighborhood we're dealing with. Because one of the interesting aspects of the newspaper article is that when the responding law enforcement officers, or the people that were answering questions, that's what I mean by responding, not the guys who responded to the murder, but the people who were answering questions for this reporter on behalf of the Ross Township Police Department, said that or didn't confirm or offer any evidence for the conclusion that the attacker killed himself in his car. And that's, again, not to say that there's a conspiracy here, but if he was, for example, found with a murder weapon, self-inflicted gunshot wound, none of these things are included really in the police report. And furthermore, interesting, I mean, they do say that Bing Liu was shot several times. And they say that then this guy purportedly killed himself in his car, but the Pittsburgh Gazette reporter couldn't find anyone who could verify or give witness to the idea that there were multiple gunshots heard in this neighborhood. So that's another reason why I want to come over here, because I want to see what sort of neighborhood it is, and to what extent that's possible. I mean, a few gunshots in a house, and then 5 minutes later, someone 100 meters away on another road, the guy gets in his car and shoots himself, and nobody hears any of these things. I do think that, first of all, we're going to find a neighborhood that will be obvious why they don't know each other. And I want to see if I can confirm whether he would own the house or whether he would have bought it. Because if it's a rental area, then that could also explain why nobody really knew him, or at least everybody's claiming they didn't know him. And it could also be, for example, that his wife doesn't speak English very well for whatever reason. They're recent immigrants. Who knows? I mean, he's been in America very long, but we don't know for sure how long his wife has been in America. His parents are living in China. But there are a lot of unanswered questions, and I just don't want this story to be lost in the news cycle until we have at least figured out what the deal is. If it turns out to be, some financial transaction gone wrong, or a weed deal gone south, that's great. But I doubt that. I'm not thinking right now that that's going to be our outcome. I think it's going to be more complicated than that. It could be a lover's quarrel, for example, but he's married, right? So what's this guy doing? It's a pretty complicated lover's quadrangle then, or whatever. But anyway, I'm not speculating. I don't want to speculate. I'm speculating on this drive. I'm speculating all the time, but I don't really want to do too much of that. I just want to, I'm talking on the way over there, so maybe I'll edit a lot of this out. I don't know. But, I want to go over here because I just want to get a feeling for what I'm dealing with. If I go over here and there's unmarked police officers waiting by the street and stuff, I don't know, I'm not going to feel very good about that. I feel like it's been a couple days now, so if I go over here now and it's just me, I can ride around. The road seems to have a little circle that I can drive, so if I can just drive down Elm Court and do the circle, then and there's no big deal at 200 Elm Court, other than maybe some police marking or something like that, I'm down with it. I'm fine with it. But I'm going to be pretty sketched out if somebody's asking me for my ID and shit when I go over there, because I just don't... What the hell is this? I don't feel very good about the idea that this could be about COVID. I don't think that's really possible. I think it's just a way of remembering him, that he was working on important science, and that he was working on it because he could work on anything he wanted to. He's a postdoc, right? He's a research assistant professor. He had a good idea. I'm sure he probably got funded there was a call for research, of course, right after in March at some point, or in February, for proposals on new projects to be funded by NIH. And so if he was clever enough to come up with a proposal that made sense, that probably could contribute to our fight against COVID-19, then it just goes to show you that he's a clever guy, right? I mean, if you look at his publication list, he makes me look like a fool. And if most of that is computational and math, kind of structural biology, that shit is tight, yo. That shit is very, very tight. Oh, I gotta go straight because I turned the wrong way. Darn it. Rerouting, okay. So I don't know. I mean, I don't think you can have any doubts about the fact that there's millions, if not billions of dollars at stake if they are putting every person, willing and unwilling, on the radio and on TV to say that we are not going to be able to do anything normal until there's a vaccine. I got to admit to you, man, I'm really frightened about the idea that I'm never going to get to see Medeski, Martin, and Wood in person in a bar anymore, or in person in a small theater anymore. I'm not going to get to see a live concert at a bar anymore. Is that ever going to happen again? Are we seriously talking like this? Because I'm not really willing to entertain that level of change right now. And you can talk all the smack you want about it. I still need to see concrete evidence which leads anyone who's trying to be honest about it, who leads anyone to believe that we have something on our hands that needs for us to be extremely frightened of it. Okay. And I just don't see the numbers. You know, they're going to start freaking out when the states open up, and then people are getting sicker and testing positive because they're going to test more people in the states that open, and so of course they're going to find more positive cases. But the number of videos of nurses and doctors sort of whistleblowing about the idea that people might be dying because the ventilators are being used, and dying because incorrect ventilator settings are being used. We could be in serious trouble, folks, if we're being, sort of bamboozled by the idea that, you got set up to think that this was a pneumonia and that you needed to ventilate people, and guess what? You didn't need to ventilate anyone, and everybody that you ventilated had a much higher chance of dying. Are we looking at that number right now? How much? What is the chance of somebody dying if they're ventilated now? Because if it's very, very high, then maybe ventilation is not the answer. And it sketches me out a lot that we're not really there yet. So I worry about that. I do. I really worry about that. So here's the neighborhood. Maybe I'm going to stop here now and put the camera around the other way. Okay, so I'm driving, and here we're going to go up to the place where these apartment, I don't know what it is, it's like apartment buildings. And this is not typical for, I gotta say, it's not typical for Pittsburgh. I mean, I guess if you didn't live up here, you look at the houses on the right, and those are more typical old houses of Pittsburgh, right? Look at them. And now we have a red. No, this is just sketching me out for a minute there. So these are all apartment buildings. I'm interested to see what this is all about. Ah, I see. Private property, no trespassing, I see. So you see what kind of place it is here. Now I get it. That's why nobody knew him. But it's also maybe why no one, I'm actually going to turn around and get out of here now. I don't think I'm going to go all the way to Elm Court. Or maybe I am because it's Birch. Okay, let's get the hell out of here. This is basically where it was. So just so you can see what the place looks like and what kind of houses they are. And so the idea is that he had his back garden open. So I don't know, these don't look like rental houses, but I could ask these people, but I'm afraid to ask them. I don't want to be that dude. I'm not an investigative reporter yet. Maybe I should be. Okay, here we go. We're going to go to Charlemagne Court. And this would be the place where the dude walked back to from here. So it should have been across this street, right? The Ross Park Street here. But it's a hill. So where I just was is on the back side of these here. So you can even imagine, and I would have to confirm that, but you could even imagine, oh, where the hell am I going now? Now I guess I'm going up here. So now you see where his car was over there. So somewhere down there, that's Charlemagne Court down there, I believe. Yep, that's it down there. So there you see wherever his car was parked, that's what was going on here. Hey guys, this is J.C. on a bike here. I'm in Pittsburgh, out in Ross Township, standing on Ross Park Road, I believe. To my left is the Charlemagne Circle, where somewhere on that street, the attacker of Bing Lu shot himself, or purportedly shot himself. And somewhere to my right is the house in which Bing Lu lived with his wife. It's pretty obvious to me from the noise of the traffic down there, and it's McKnight Road is right there. It's quite a busy road, probably most nights, even during this pandemic lockdown. And the amount of traffic noise at night, the number of people that live here, it's not very normal for Pittsburgh. It's actually quite a crowded residential area. A lot of these look like rental units, although I don't know, I haven't interviewed anyone. So it's also very easy to understand why not every neighbor would know each other, know Bing Lu and his wife. So I can't really shed any more light on that. I just wanted to come here and see it for myself and try to understand if they lived like I live in Pittsburgh, then it would be very strange for someone not to hear the gunshots. Here, brick buildings, buildings that are connected to each other, like in a duplex style, it's very easy for me to sort of imagine a scenario where 3 gunshots and then a gunshot outside in a car. You might not have witnesses coming forward saying that they heard these noises. It doesn't feel that shady to me. Anyway, I'm here. I don't know what else to say. I just want to figure out if there's anything sketchy here, that's all. And make sure that it's not. Because I don't think we should hype that up either, right? I mean, we don't need that right now. There's enough bullshit going on right now that we don't need to distract ourselves with something like a apparent murder-suicide and waste any of our time chasing down this. I just wasted a half an hour, so you don't have to waste any more. Because even if this is a murder-suicide that has something to do with COVID-19 research and the billions of dollars that stand to be made by treatments that are or are not real, let's not forget that our boy Fauci went on TV and lauded the recent remdesivir study, which just barely squeaked through with significance. And before you say that I'm full of baloney, just look up the study that he cited and look up that it didn't change the lethality of the lethal outcomes of the virus at all, but it only reduced the hospital stay from 15 to 11 days for seriously ill patients. And that change was just barely significant. So we're talking about a lot of money here. I mean, they're also going to defend themselves by saying that remdesivir is giving it away for free. But you heard the guy on the way here, right? I don't even know what mayor or governor that was. But you heard that guy talking that we're not going to be able to go back to normal until there's a vaccine or an effective treatment. I don't see the numbers, man. I don't see the numbers. We need to keep our minds and our eyes and our ears open for the numbers. And we need to scrutinize the numbers very carefully, because again, if they told you that this airplane had a certain percentage chance of crashing, you would want to know exactly what that percentage was. You wouldn't want them to fudge the numbers and tell you better not fly because the odds are 1,000,000 to 1 or the odds are 5 to 1. And when we were talking about closing down in January, when we were talking about the worst cases scenarios, we were talking about a pandemic with a virus with an R number between 6 and 4, which would be extraordinarily contagious and infectious and very dangerous if it should have a certain percentage of people dying that's higher than the average flu. But now, unfortunately for the CDC and for the debate about real science, the numbers of real flu cases as recorded by the CDC is being scrutinized like never before. And the way that they record deaths for COVID-19 is being scrutinized in a way that I don't think they could have fully anticipated. I think they thought that doctors and nurses would just go along with the plan and go along with the directives and continue. But it does seem like we're going to wake up and figure out, and there are going to be sufficient willing witnesses to come forward and say that we may have made mistakes with ventilation, and we maybe not have done it as well as we could have done it in terms of saving as many lives as possible, and that the actual, if we're going to blame all these deaths on COVID right now, then what we're going to see is when we finally come up with a treatment that's effective, that maybe the survival rate will go up to near 100%. What if that happens? What if, you see, we're willing to entertain the what if scenario on the bad side, and at any cost, shoot, I should have probably turned left there. But you know, what's the Happy Home Buffet Sushi and Grill gonna do? What about the North Hills Village Mall? What's that place ever gonna do again? I mean, there's some serious changes that they're proposing that should occur that in a lot of ways, you know, this is where it gets creepy. In a lot of ways, a lot of people would like these changes to occur. It'd be great if we could stop some of the consumerism and the driving around and the mad materialism in America. It would be great if we could better control food waste, but what is this fool doing? God darn it, it's seriously. And I don't want that. I don't want to make all these rash decisions when I feel like I'm having numbers forced on me. When I feel like I'm having people actively tell me that I don't get it, and then not trying to explain it to me. It's extraordinary. They go on TV and they talk about biology that I've never heard of, talk about epidemiology that I've never heard of, and countermeasures for biological contagions that I've never heard of before, unless we're talking about a biological contagion that kills everybody it touches. Then I totally get why we have to stay at home. Even if it was 10 times as bad as the flu in terms of lethality, I think we would need to probably stay home. But what if it's only double? the lethality of the flu? What if instead of what the CDC says is a bad flu season of 50,000 people, or whatever their numbers are? That's the sketchy part. I can't even say the numbers because I've read so many different ones, and they're all conflicting depending on who you talk to and who you read, because they put unexplained pneumonia in with different groups whenever they want to forward whatever agenda or current idea they want to forward. If it's a flu pandemic and the flu vaccine, then they put all those in with the flu. But that's not always the case, and it could very well be fudging the numbers right now with respect to that. And the terrifying thing becomes is if they're really fudging the numbers with respect to that, and the use of ventilators, the incorrect use of ventilators, the inability to get people off ventilators. You see, it doesn't take very many screw-ups. It doesn't take a very big percentage before it starts to get sketchy. But if it's a large percentage of people that are being misdiagnosed, mistreated, because we still don't really know what's going on with the virus, and we didn't really give anybody time to figure it out, because we didn't even try to figure it out. We didn't send anybody over to China when the outbreak was starting over there to find out what was going on. We took China's word for everything. We didn't bother to go over there and try to help or try to figure out, get data for ourselves. And so when it came over here, the WHO and everybody else was telling us what to do. And the doctors, being overwhelmed by the number of people coming in and bamboozled by the testing and the social media ramp up, they just did what they're told. They're given a tree of action, right? Is he this? Is she that? Is he this? Is she that? Yes, give her on the ventilator, right? I mean, if that's one of the end points, and we don't reevaluate, okay, so everybody that's gone on the ventilator pretty much dies, maybe we shouldn't put them on the ventilator, at least not in the way that we're doing it. If we're not evaluating that choice and to how as effective it is, then I think we have a big problem. Remember, they made a big deal about shortage of ventilators. So even that, in a way, could be seen as kind of a subliminal screw up, Like if you say, oh, we're going to be short of ventilators, you're already putting it in the back of people's heads that we need ventilators. That, yeah, it makes sense, because remember they said that we're going to be short of ventilators. So this person is really having a hard time breathing and they're in real stress. Maybe we should put them on a ventilator. Yep, that's what they were doing in China. That's what they were doing in Italy. So let's just do it. Dear God, folks, I think it's quite likely that through a combination of misinformation, bad information, rushed treatment, whatever, we may be dealing with something other than a very deadly virus here. We may be dealing with a very deadly set of WHO parameters for how to treat this virus. We could be dealing with misinformation or bad information being spread by the CDC and FEMA or whoever is coordinating this information spreading. Because presumably all the hospitals in New York were prepped and there was some briefing which told the doctors what to expect and the treatments that were working the best. And presumably that occurred. We don't know. That's something else we really need to investigate. And we need to have clear witnessing of. We need to archive the video testimony of the people that are stressed out and what they see during the pandemic, what they saw during the peak in New York City, and what they saw during the peak in other places, so that we can really start to, in retrospect, evaluate the circumstances of the pandemic, evaluate the circumstances of what actually happened in each of these deaths. Because one of the things to consider is that there'd be awful lot of malpractice suits. There could be a giant class action lawsuit if we find out that the CDC directive of severe viral pneumonia patients needing to be on a ventilator at such and such settings, and then we could find ourselves in a situation where giant legal action could take place. Whole swaths of people could decide that they weren't given the truth because their loved one was reported to have died of COVID, but they were on a ventilator at the last minute, at the last 2 days of their life, and this could be the source of it. Now, I'm trying to reevaluate this. This is the last thing I'm going to say. I don't know if I'm going to put it in or not. But Wolfgang Wodarg, the guy that with the long curly hair and the long straight blonde hair and the glasses, the older dude who was, maybe he even has white hair. I think it's blonde white hair. But the German guy who I first showed you a video of about a month ago, who was coming out speaking that this was the case. He makes a very interesting accusation in a German video that I've tried to get translated by a friend of mine in Germany, and he gave me a synopsis which includes the statement that SARS is already in the population. SARS, the original SARS, that it had a number of, I presume the implications are, because I've read this elsewhere, that one of the reasons why SARS snuffed out or fizzled out was because it had a quite large mutation, which rendered it very much less infectious and very much less dangerous. And so Wolfgang is arguing, Dr. Wodarg is arguing, or states in this second or third video of his that's only in German, no translation available, that SARS virus is endemic. And what this would imply then, imagine this, that if the PCR tests that they're doing are not specific enough, then the overlap between the SARS and the original SARS and the SARS-CoV-2 could be enough to give huge numbers of false positives on a relatively not contagious disease. So then what they're testing for is the presence of SARS, the original virus, and then the people that are dying or having complications from the actual SARS-CoV-2 virus, which then they would also test for with an antibody test. But we don't know if the antibody tests are also not testing for the SARS original virus. And so it would be a very interesting implications of that German video if I could just get it translated. Unfortunately, YouTube has turned off all foreign language translations with at least regard to this one. I don't know why the subtitles don't work for German. You would think German would be one of those languages that would definitely have a translation already, but maybe I'm wrong. So I'm going to check again tonight to see if there is a translation that I can link you guys to. Thanks for joining me on this ride. I hope it put to rest this, and more importantly, for now, I'll keep an eye on it, but for now, we need to stay focused on the prize, and that is making sure that we're keeping track of the numbers, where they're coming from, who's giving us the numbers, what the numbers are, and what they mean. Because relative to the projections that were made in January and February, we need to be reevaluating whether the current numbers justify the actions that we're still taking. Because we need to realize that the impact is very, very great and very wide with respect to this stuff. I think I'm going to wrap it up here, and I probably cut it off earlier. Anyway, thanks for joining me. Bye.